Good morning and welcome to Footy Rants. I'm Benny Matthews and today I'll be taking you through everything round 22 in the NRL. Well, look, it was a pretty entertaining round. There was a lot of games that, saw fairly unexpected results, whether the favoured team did end up winning. Probably ended up winning by a margin that wasn't necessarily expected. So yeah, there's a couple of big score lines and a few big upsets, especially in the realms of finals play. So yeah, we'll get stuck into our highlights package now. And our first game we had was on Thursday night, was the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs up against the Parramatta Eels. The first 40 minutes, it was probably Parramatta's best 40 minutes that they've put together all season, in my opinion. I thought it was extremely structured, and remembering this is without powerhouse Clint Gutherson. The first try there, we see Daniel Alvaro just steamroll over the top of Aiden Tolman and James Graham. That probably sums up their season right there, with that error from Morris off the tap. But yeah, just the sheer weight of possession, but also the execution from Mitchell Moses and Corey Norman. We see there that Corey Norman, Mitchell Moses, I'll get it right eventually. Mitchell Moses makes the line break and puts French through, and then he gets the second last pass. He created all the space here for Radra's try as well. The thing that's impressed me most over the last 6 weeks with Mitchell Moses, though, however, is his improved defence. I berated him about it week after week, especially in his transition from the Tigers to Parramatta, and he only actually came up with one missed tackle, and in what was horrendous conditions. You can see there on the screen. So that was the thing that impressed me most. But when you're coming off the back of 88% completion rates in this sort of weather, you're going to win most games. But on the other side of the coin, I mean, you look at the Bulldogs, and yes, I know the scoreline was 20-4, but you put that down to a few late penalty goals in the second half, because Parramatta, they didn't really have any answers. Once Bevan French didn't return in the second half, Corey Norman got put back to fullback. That was pretty much it. They sort of had to put the cue in the rack a little bit, and I think they were, for the last 20 minutes, I think the commentary team sort of summed it up quite well, that both teams were out there and they both just wanted the game to end. Parramatta knew they weren't going to really win by any more. Bulldogs knew that they weren't going to come back and win. So the last 20 to 30 minutes was sort of a little bit disappointing on both ends. I felt that, Parramatta ran into a few roadblocks as far as creativity goes, and trying to incorporate Norman into that attack whilst he was trying to simultaneously play fullback. But aside from that, look, it's another tick in the box for Parramatta. They're continuing to climb their way up the NRL ladder, and they're still very much a threat. One that's not completely taken seriously just yet, but if they can continue to string wins together, if Clint Gutherson can come back late in the season and get back to the form that he's displayed throughout the year, well, who knows? They could be a surprise packet for sure. The first game of Friday night, we had the Dragons up against the Rabbitohs at the SCG. What a game of momentum shifts. It was just tight the whole game, to be honest. The game didn't really look iced until we entered the last 10 minutes, when the Dragons hit that 10-point lead. But the fashion that the Bunnies came back in, again, it just alludes back to the execution we know that they're capable of. When they made all those changes last week, and they stuck with Walker at 6 and Johnson at 1 there, we see that was the first try, was Walker to Johnson. So we all know that they're capable of these sorts of displays, but it just wasn't happening on a consistent basis. We see old Josh Dugan go limping off there, so Dragon supporters, I know I've got a couple of mates who are in that boat there. They're off him, to be honest. I don't think too many people are sad to see him leave the Red V and head to Cronulla. But getting back to the crux of this game, one of the decisions that proved to be pivotal was the penalty goal that Souths took to take the game to 18-14. You know, most sides when you're down 18-12 and you take that, you're sort of like, oh, is that really the right move? And same with the Dragons. They're taking the 2 points as soon as Burgess was off. I felt like they could have done a little bit more. We've seen there that Kurt Mann goes over for the try. He's been their best. Again, Kurt Mann has been the Dragons' best. The fact that he came on, like what he thought his role would have been leading into that game versus what he had to do would have been completely different. You know, McGregor's not anticipating that, and there's the penalty goal that we see there to take things to 18-14. But yeah, McGregor wouldn't have been anticipating Dugan getting injured. So Kurt Mann stepping into that centre role, you know, ends up with that try assist there for Nene McDonald, scored one himself. What did he end up with? He ended up with 193 metres, try assist and a try. You know, you can't ask more of a bloke coming off the bench who's just got to sort of step in and mould his role. And now we'll see here the desperation of the Bunnies in the last 5 minutes. You know, just John Sutton doing what John Sutton does. You know, when he is at his damaging best, he has the ball in hand, he's looking for offloads, and then he's supporting off the back of those. And when we see them digging in the line there, strip the Dragons for a number, and you know McGregor would have been really disappointed. We see, you know, Kurt Mann's paddling there, and he's useless to get to Goodwin by the time he has to turn out and chase. And when you've got a bloke who's got a kick to win a game, you know, Adam Reynolds is probably up there on my list with your Jonathan Thurstons, your James Maloney's and whatnot to get the job done. So the Bunnies 26-24 and they stay alive. The second game Friday night, we saw the Cowboys up against the Storm. Again, you know, it might be the biased supporter coming out of me, but I didn't think the scoreline was super indicative of the effort and the tenacity of the Cowboys. 26 points to 8. Losing, you know, Gavin Cooper and Antonio Winterstein within the first 10 minutes obviously didn't help their cause, but outside of that, they were able to actually develop an 8-4 lead, as we'll see them get to shortly. But the biggest pluses for me were Slater. You know, for a bloke to come back and end up with 3 try assists on his return game, and just the way he incorporates the involvement of the whole back five when he's showing up in and around the ruck, leading into good ball. Sorry, not around the ruck. Sorry, the way he shows up out the back of those plays, especially on this right-hand side where Chambers plays. We see him there. Just gets Chambers on the outside so well. And, you know, Cohen Hess, he's no centre. Centre's arguably the hardest position to defend. And when you've got a bloke that's playing, like you see how deep into the attacking line he was, he's never going to turn and chase down a Will Chambers, Cohen Hess. I don't care how much of a great debut season you're sort of having, mate. You're never going to get in that sort of realms. And yeah, you know, the Melbourne Storm are the best at it. They're going to exploit weaknesses, and that's exactly what they did. More ticks in the boxes for the Cowboys, though. This man here, Michael Morgan, tried his absolute guts out. I don't think you could really ask any more of him. He ended up with something like 160 metres running. So, you know, as well as trying to orchestrate the plays of the teams in conjunction with Tamari Martin, he's also just trying to get his team on the front foot because he knows blokes are playing extra minutes. So I've already alluded to one of those players, and that was Cohen Hess, racking up 78 minutes after, you know, Gavin Cooper went off early. And then you had Sean Fensom play 80 minutes in the front row. Jake Granville played 80 minutes for the first time in God knows how long. I'd be surprised if he's played 80 minutes this year. And, you know, couldn't have come at the worst time in actually drop Ben Hampton for this game. So whether that was the plan all along, I suppose it was. They probably anticipated having a bit more help in and around the ruck as far as fresh legs go. But yeah, I think the Cowboys can sort of hold their heads up high. They've got Penrith next week down there, and I think everything will absolutely tighten up. It'll be interesting to hear more in the stakes of the injuries of Gavin Cooper and Antonio Winterstein, and on how long they're going to be on the sidelines for. And if they are, that's going to be big ticks in the boxes for Penrith, and they'll definitely be smelling blood down there, especially after getting pipped on the post last time when they played them only about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and Ethan Lowe kicked that goal from the sideline to beat them. Other areas where I thought Melbourne were really good, especially in the selection of Riley Jacks. I said it leading into the game that defensively, I thought that's why he would get selected, just with the bigger forwards from the Cowboys. And he actually made the most tackles of any back in the Melbourne Storm side. He ended up with 22 tackles and only 2 missed tackles. So for me, that was a good selection, and he definitely went out there and proved himself. It had been a number of weeks since we'd seen him wear the Storm jersey now. He's been plying his trade back with the Sunny Coast Falcons in the Queensland Cup, and came on and definitely didn't disappoint. So that pretty much is the wrap up of that game. Melbourne Storm just went out, executed, did what they had to do, and just by sheer weight of possession and pushing and pushing and pushing, that's when the scoreboard, the Cowboys had their opportunities when it was 22-8 to make it 22-14 and really make a fist of the game and make it look a lot better. But that last stitch try from Addo Carr, it's probably more a reward of tenacity and consistency for the Melbourne Storm. On to Saturday night. Well, they finally done it. Back to back. Newcastle, 26-10 victors over the New Zealand Warriors. It was a game that was orchestrated from Brock Lamb. I thought he really led the side around super efficiently. But for me, it was just where we said in the lead into the game where they were going to pip them. Where I thought they were going to pip them was around the edges. So the edge back rowers in the middle. And we've seen there, Mitch Barnett scores the first 2 tries. So there's already big ticks in the box for the 11-12-13 for Newcastle versus the 11-12-13 for the Warriors. They did end up making a few changes there. They pushed Mannering into the back row. And a young fella, forgive me, I can't remember your name, slotted in. He was originally named 18th man. It was a back and forth affair, but it ended up being the difference, especially when Joe Wardle got ruled out. I thought this is the perfect opportunity for Fitzgibbon to, restake his claim almost in first grade. Because I was a little bit perplexed as to why he did actually get dropped in the first place, but it was really good game management in the end from Newcastle. There were times there late in the game. So it was probably midway through the second half here, especially he was here 16-4 with 20 to go. You're like, can they hold on? That they've definitely blown leads from there before. But yeah, again, Brock Lamb just doing what we know he's capable of doing. And I'm not sure if it's a case of does this just take time? Is it a consistency-based thing? Is he actually going to be a genuine NRL half in the future? And all these things I think still are yet to be answered. But as long as they continue to build in this back end of the year, the number of players that got coming, Connor Watson, Kalen Ponga, Guerra, as well as already having Kenny Dow, there's big things coming for Newcastle. And I really hope that leading into the season next year, we see a definitive change and, that they made a couple of signings that they probably thought were going to execute a little bit better. It's a shame we haven't seen Rory Kostchasing out there for them this year with that throat injury. But I think like I said, leading into the game is such a massive occasion for not only Newcastle as a team moving forward, but also Newcastle a town, and for them to go out there and go back to back for the first time in so long, it's just that relief that I think the general public and the fans would have loved to see. So yeah, massive raps to Newcastle, massive raps to Brock Lamb. You got exactly what you deserved. You know what I mean? 90% completion rates are always going to be a big positive moving forward when you're trying to win rugby league games. And Nathan Brown definitely would have been ecstatic with that stat, and just the way that they were able to continue to control the game into the back 20 and go on and ice that win. Digging deeper into Saturday night, Titans versus the Broncos. Well, who saw this absolute slaughtering coming? Jesus Christ. Broncos 54, Titans 0. And keep in mind, it took 23 minutes for a point to be scored in this match. So 10 tries in 57 minutes from Brisbane. I don't really have to say too much. I'm just going to pretty much let this highlights package unravel. And we've seen it start from there. Just overreading the play. That's the luxury of having someone like a Robertson and Gillett in your back line. You're going to have eyes looking out the back, and Nikorima, he's got that off the mark speed that we're so accustomed to now, and he's going to make you pay more times than not. The thing that sort of I guess I want to argue is we're hearing a few people now, oh look, we're seeing the Broncos really come into their own and become genuine premiership contenders. Look, I think the Broncos are going to do what the Broncos do and finish somewhere thereabouts. Like I think they'll finish well inside the four, and they may even finish in the top two behind the Storm. But as far as a side that is going to genuinely threaten for a title, I'm still not convinced. I think they just lack the consistency at times, and we've got to remember this is a Titans side that's been thoroughly disappointing over the course of the season, especially with the talent. Hayne, Peets, Proctor, all massive signings, and just haven't really been able to execute for the Gold Coast this season. Coming off the bench again, I thought Tavita Pangai Jr. was really, really strong. He's probably been one of their best young forwards over the course of the season. But yeah, have a look at this. Like the no-look flick pass to Robertson, and just knowing, it was before he even reached the 10-metre line. He hadn't even gotten past the two defenders. And watch this here, slow-mo. As soon as he catches this ball, it was just like, see you later, I'm out. And I think, Offengowi's definitely got a case to answer for there with that spear tackle. With the severity of it, we may not see him again this year. You just don't know. His good behaviour will definitely pay him dividends, but yeah, a bit of a concern for the young Bronco there. The control of the middle, and when I say middles, I'm more alluding to the spine actually. So that being Ben Hunt, Nikorima, and Anthony Milford. They just had their running shoes on that night. Leaving Benjamin Marshall out was definitely the right move. You don't need four of those bodies against a Gold Coast Titans pack who's so big, especially off the bench. They're going to bring big bodies onto the field. And for me, now I think that's... We won't see Benji Marshall again this year, I don't think. I'd be very, very surprised. For Wayne Bennett, obviously the biggest takeaway out of this game is that 54 points in the for and against. Should they come into contention on same competition points with any other club come the last round, I think they're taking the cookies every day of the week. I think they're over 140 points plus now. The only other club that's got a better for and against than that is Melbourne Storm. I think they're on about 180. So, yeah, outside of that, that's obviously a big tick in the box. But yeah, just that loss last week to Parramatta, that's just a flag for me, because they had the massive win against Canterbury the week before. So have a massive win, a super disappointing loss, keeping in mind that they had a really good start against Para as well, 12-point lead after 10 minutes, and then weren't able to score again. It's going to be very interesting now. They've got Cronulla this week, who are coming off a super disappointing loss that we're about to enter into now. That next week for me, for a lot of clubs, that we're really going to start to be like, okay, this is where they're at. This is who we're taking seriously. This is who we're not. We're entering the last couple of weeks, and form's not going to shift too much outside of these last couple of weeks. We're going to see what team's going to make their run and who are the serious players. And for me, next week will be Broncos' opportunity to convince me that they're genuine title contenders up against Cronulla. So again, as I just said, Cronulla, disappointing loss against the Raiders, but one that I think a lot of people did see coming. Maybe not in this fashion. So the game ended 30 points to 12 in favour of the Canberra Raiders. And it was all Cronulla early on. They dominated possession and were getting through their set seemingly quite well. But I think in the end, when you've got a Raiders side who normally throws a footy round, does have a fair few errors in them, and then they complete at 91%, add on top of what they did around the sin binning of Josh Papali, and we'll get to all that shortly, but as far as the highlights go, but we'll talk about it now. Papali goes off, and Cronulla don't touch the ball, I don't think, until about the last 90 odd seconds of his 10 minutes in the sin bin. So they just didn't make him pay for it. They just didn't make the Raiders pay for it. 3 penalty goals in the space of less than 10 minutes in the end. And I think it was the super smart way to go, soak down the clock. Even if it only equates to 1 converted try, so what? They just, slowly starved Cronulla of oxygen. I thought the forward pack for Cronulla was amazing. Josh Hodgson was outstanding. We see the desperation there, and he goes over for the game. I thought the game was pretty well dust there. Even after they came out in the second half, Cronulla just looked sort of defeated. You know what I mean? They never really got back into the groove of things, and I just really like how Shannon Boyd and Junior Paulo lay that platform and then come on for their second efforts. I think that's been super indicative of the late game rushes, even in games that they've lost where they've been in those arm wrestles and been able to score late points. It's been a bit of a trademark for the Raiders, and we see here this is where Papali gets 10 in the bin. So we've still got 25 minutes to go. But yeah, I thought they managed it superbly. And you look on the other side of the scale, we see Flanagan blowing up there. It just came down to what's been letting Cronulla down all season. Their discipline inside their own half, especially inside their own 20 to 30 metre line. They're that sort of club, similar to the Melbourne Storm, who's happy to give away that penalty on their own goal line, but you can't really do it when you're down 24 points to 12. So yeah, look, just disappointing loss for Cronulla. It'll be interesting, as we said, how they bounce back against Brisbane next week. I believe that is at Suncorp as well. So, it's never an easy trip coming up to Queensland here, and especially against a raging support base like the Brisbane Broncos do. So it's a really important game for Cronulla. If they let this one slip, this isn't the time to start stringing losses together. So yeah, I think for Coach Flanagan, it'll be back to the drawing board. Hopefully that injury to Jack Bird isn't anything substantial, but hey, it didn't look too good. Anytime a player's coming off like that, nursing a shoulder in the game of rugby league, you probably at long odds to be playing the week after. Another feather in the Raiders cap, Kurt Baptiste, 11 minutes. I don't think his services are really needed now that Hodgson's sort of put on that display, so it'll be interesting to see if he gets his start next week off the bench. And Taylor only had 5 minutes, so they essentially beat them with 15 players, which is rather embarrassing for Cronulla. So yeah, there's some little things around pack selection. I think Baptiste will still get a start next week, just simply because you want that extra ball player coming on with fresh legs, especially when you are coming up against the Broncos next week, and they'll be doing something similar. And I think it'll just be a case of fighting fire with fire. But sorry, it's Cronulla playing next week, not the Raiders. I think the Raiders have the Warriors next week, so yeah, perhaps they won't bring Baptiste. They'll just try and bash them with 4 big men off the bench. Geez, I'd love to see Dave Taylor go rogue. Anyway, I'm starting to drool now. Apologise, I'm moving forward. We're into the Sunday's game. Another upset. Fuck me. Manly, 36 points to 18 over the Roosters. Who's seen this coming? Well, early on it was all the Roosters. I really loved what that edge of Keary, Mitchell, and Tupou were able to do in the opening exchanges. Even though we see Manly score the first try, from there on out for the next 25 minutes, it's just the Roosters, and I thought, far out, this is going to be an absolute blitz up. Just the showmanship of Tupou there, just flirting with the sideline, like have a look at that. Trent Robinson with his heart in his mouth, he'd probably give him a fair spray for that, I reckon. But then, where I felt that momentum shifted drastically was once Warrior-Hargreaves and Napa had finished their first spells. I thought they did an amazing job of coming on and intimidating the Manly forward pack, which just forced Manly to tighten things up. And when you're applying so much pressure in the middle there, and you're forcing your edge defenders to come in tight, and you've got the execution of the outside backs like the Roosters do, that's why we've seen these results in this first half. But it was this one-on-one effort here. We see Winterstein run straight over the top of Joey Manu, continues to push through, and then push Trbojevic away. I really thought the Roosters could have handled that a little bit better defensively, but just rewards to Winterstein, who's continuing to have a stellar season for an older guy. He sort of made his surge of an NRL career fairly late. It's not something that we see all too often. But yeah, once Trbojevic scored that try, that for me was a massive momentum shift. And when they came out in the second half and he linked up, as he does so well, in and around the ruck there, we see that play all the time, and sometimes we see it off his brother Jake. And just the awareness just to run it round to the post just to make it easier. That's the sort of player that Trbojevic appears to be. He just goes the extra mile to make things easier on his teammates. And once Trbojevic scored that second try, the Roosters just couldn't get back into the game. They really, really struggled. From there, Tupou was able to get his running boots on, and in 44 minutes, 18 hit-ups, 203 metres and 19 tackles. Now, they're the stats that you want to see when your team needs to be on the front foot. And I think Trent Barrett will not only be pleased, but also relieved to come back after two massive losses, come out in front of your home crowd and get the job done. The extra plus in Manly's book as well was their forwards off the bench. I was really, really impressed with Darcy Lussick and Lloyd Perrott. I think Perrett's been a great signing too. And you look over at the Roosters side of the board, and Tedavano, Tekeaho and Guerra just didn't match up. So again, it sort of coincides with that first stint of Warrior-Hargreaves and Napa, and then those guys coming on versus Lussick and Perrott, and they just dominated them, especially in that opening portion, that opening 20 minutes of the second half, and from there on in, the Roosters were just clinging on. And I think that's what certain teams should have been able to do to the Roosters, keeping in mind that they're still missing Gordon, Friend and Boyd Cordner. They're the sort of exploitations that you need to be making on clubs like these guys. So, yeah, a big rap to the Manly side for going out there and getting the job done against their home crowd. I'm not sure what's happened here. There we go. A little bit of a late delay. But yeah, on to the final game. Penrith up against the Tigers. A lot of hoo-ha made around, the Cleary father-son scenario, but for me it wasn't something that overly interested me. I don't think they would have really bought into much hype either. Just would have been like any other weekend. Excuse me. Yeah, we've seen early on, Penrith were relatively unlucky. I thought that was the second try that they got disallowed. I know that, yes, Peter Wallace was in the way, but we see there, Eisenhuth made no attempt. It was clearly a dive, and I think any time a player is trying to exploit the rules in that manner, he doesn't deserve to be rewarded. So yeah, it took the Penrith side a little while to get going, and the scoreboard of 28 points to 14 in favour of Penrith definitely wasn't indicative of the game. It was 16-14 with just over 5 minutes to go before Penrith finally iced it, and the stats that will be most concerning to Anthony Griffin, especially this time of year when they are trying to press for the finals, and whether they think that they're actually going to be a genuine chance moving into the finals, whether they can get 2 or 3 weeks deep. 68% completion rate, 43 missed tackles, and 14 errors. Again, I know you look at one side and you say, hey, look, we still got a fucking win here. We got the 2 competition points. We're still alive in this competition. But you need to be doing more with it. Dylan Edwards, they need to be doing more with this kid. They need to be giving him the rewards that he's doing at the back. Some of the takes that he took under pressure from Luke Brooks, some of the balls that he was putting up there were phenomenal. And to see him get his reward, got some stats on him there. Ran for 206 metres, 2 line breaks and a try. Peachy, we've already seen cross for a try and had 1 disallowed. He was massive too, 199 metres, a line break and a try. But yeah, by the end, I think that you could sort of smell that this was coming eventually. It was just a matter of when. For Penrith, we see Zalesniak get his second try. That was another cool little matchup, him against his older brother who defected from Penrith earlier in the season. But yeah, from there, it was just a case of, I guess, just the Tigers season, just not being able to hold on, not having the troops to maintain that winning pressure in clutch situations. But moving forward, guys like Alex Twoll and Eisenhuth and Cheekham, I definitely think they're young, enthusiastic guys who you can definitely build a solid forward pack around. And I think Ivan Cleary, with the signings that he's made in Packer and Madalino, they're going to grow phenomenally once those guys come with all their wealth and experience. So yeah, look, it's interesting times moving forward. I will actually let's pull up. So yeah, we see here, Melbourne Storm clear out in front with 36 competition points, so they're 2 wins clear now. The Roosters hang on to second place on 32 points. The Broncos and the Sharks and Parramatta are now all locked up on 30 points, so they're all top 4 contenders. So it's going to be interesting. I think there's going to be a few spots, like we said earlier, that get decided by for and against, and the Broncos there with 138 plus after that massive win against the Gold Coast, that definitely puts them in top seed there. Cowboys, they've got to be careful now that they don't start to string a couple of losses together, tied with Manly on 6th position on 28 points. They're definitely not safe just yet. Penrith on 26, and now the Dragons fall outside the top 8 on 24 points. So, Penrith have done what they needed to do to get inside the top 8, but it's up to them now to go out and finish off the season and play some finals footy, because we've seen what they're capable of when they do get things right. And I definitely think that there's teams in this bottom half outside the top 4, Parramatta, North Queensland, Manly and Penrith, they can definitely upset, maybe not the Melbourne Storm. I don't know if they've got the capacity to go out there and beat sides like that. And we've seen the Cowboys aren't. Yes, they had a few injuries, but they can definitely beat sides like the Roosters, Broncos and Sharks, undoubtedly. So yeah, I can't wait for this final series. It's going to be thoroughly entertaining. Thanks very much, guys. We'll call that a wrap for the week that was in the NRL, and I look forward to previewing everything round 23 later in the week. Thanks, guys. See ya.